This is also the perfect segue to introduce my esteemed colleague and a longtime champion of creative aging, Heather Eichmeyer, who is Deputy Director of Lifetime Arts. Lifetime Arts has also been an incredibly important partner in this work with the state arts agencies, and she will take it from here for our first panel session entitled From Training to Practice, Embedding Creative Aging in Our States. Heather, I turn things over to you with gratitude for your leadership and your partnership in this work. And I invite everyone in the audience, if you'd like to turn off your video camera, please do. Welcome. Thank you. Here we go.
Thanks so much, Susan. Wow, this is such an incredible gathering. I really want to thank you, Susan, for your leadership. So right back at you, to Pam for your leadership, and the whole NASAA team for organizing this incredible opportunity for us to gather and learn together, and to EA Michelson for your incredible support. As Susan mentioned, I'm Heather Eichmeyer, Deputy Director of Lifetime Arts, and it's an absolute privilege to be here along with my colleagues from Lifetime Arts. And we're also joined by Jason Boca and Tracy Hansford from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and Chiquita Mullins-Lee and Jared Small from the Ohio Arts Council, all of whom will be introducing themselves in just a moment. We're also joined by my incredible colleague, Galia Eden, who will be supporting us with a few slides, activating the chat. So we encourage you to comment in the chat, and also moderating our Q&A. So as we get started, we want to begin by warming up the chat a little bit with an invitation. So as I make just a few welcoming remarks, please share your name, the state that you're representing, and 1 to 3 words that come to mind when you think of creative aging, whether that's from direct experience or not. So let's get the chat warmed up. Thank you so much, Galia. So for those of you who don't know Lifetime Arts, our organization was founded in 2008 by Maura O'Malley and Ed Freeman as a service organization to help develop and strengthen an infrastructure for the field of creative aging. So as arts professionals and also caregivers at the time, Maura and Ed saw a need to shift from traditional senior programming, which was often seen as passive entertainment, to really engage learning by promoting arts education programming specifically for older adults. Lifetime Arts works across the country. So we're not only working with state arts agencies and arts councils, but public libraries, all kinds of arts and cultural organizations, teaching artists, veteran services and senior service organizations, and systems and institutions that support them. We provide training and professional development, as well as coaching, technical assistance, and consulting services. And our goal is really to help community-based organizations deliver engaging participatory programs for older adults, and to see older adults as creative, active, and social learners. So over the past 2 years, we have had the incredible joy and privilege to work with 22 state arts agencies through NASAA's Creative Aging Initiative. And through this work, we've trained more than 500 teaching artists, more than 400 staff within arts councils, as well as libraries and veteran services in partnership with them. We've also offered about 12 of those states additional coaching and technical assistance services. So in today's session, our education staff is going to have an honest, lively dialogue with staff from Utah and Ohio, 2 of the states that have had a long-standing commitment to creative aging and have worked closely with Lifetime Arts to achieve what they've called some missing pieces in their creative aging work. Through this conversation, we'll discuss ways in which creative aging practices can be shaped to the distinct needs and context of our communities. And they will also share some key insights to help you grow creative aging programming in your state. So love all the words in the chat, keep them coming. We really want to keep the chat lively. So if there's something that resonates with you, throw it in there, emphasize something that you heard, and please continue to put questions and thoughts in there, and we'll circle back to them to the latter part of our session today. So without further ado, I would love to pass the mic to my colleagues, Julie Klein and Annie Montgomery, to get the conversation started. So over to you both.
Thanks, Heather. Just a quick introduction. I'm Annie Montgomery. I'm the Senior Education Designer and Trainer, and I'm going to pass it to my dear colleague, Julie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Klein. I'm the Director of Education and Training here at Lifetime Arts. And so Annie, when I think about our training partnership, you and me, we've been on a lot of adventures.
Oh,
and good, bad, and in between. And I'm just thinking of this time this is before COVID, if we can all think back, what was our life like pre-COVID? It's winter. We're in a Midwestern state. We are driving, I think it was a 4-hour drive from one training site where we did a training to another. I think, it's winter, there's snow, there's those beautiful quilts that are on the side of barns, right? As we're driving through, and we finally land. We get to a hotel, which I think was between like the freeway and a frozen lake. And we were there to train librarians. And so we had this group of librarians. They were all there. They were ready to learn. And we started to do our usual training. We talk about the creative aging arts education model. We talk about the 8 sessions, the sequential, skill building over time, social connection. And it just wasn't coming through, right? There's something when you're in a training and it's sort of quiet, you kind of can tell that people, there's something getting in the way. And we started to realize that, maybe for these librarians, this was a little overwhelming. Maybe they didn't have the capacity, the ability to be able to sort of jump into this big new model of arts engagement with the older adults that they were working with. And so we just threw out our plan, right? So that night we threw out the rest of our plan for the next day. We go in and we just asked them to start where they are. We were like, okay, if you had $1 million, if you could do anything in the world, how would you want to engage the older adults who are already coming into your library? How would you want to engage them creatively? And so we get those big Post-its and people are writing, right? And there's groups of librarians and the energy in the room is just popping and people are just coming up with all kinds of things. And I remember we did like a gallery walk. So we walked around and checked out, each group's pages. And I'll never forget, right? Written really big on one of them was just taxidermy. This was this librarian's idea for this would work with their community. And it's not anything I would have ever thought of. And I don't know if they ended up doing a taxidermy project. I hope so, because I think taxidermy has a lot of creative possibilities. But but to me, it was like exemplary of we don't know in these local communities what's really right. Only they do, only you do. And that also, I felt like it reminded me that within creative aging, the older adults are creative, right? And the teaching artists are creative. And when we're training teaching artists, we're really creative. We're talking a lot about, the arts. We're talking about using our creativity. But in truth, creative aging programs can and should be creative for everybody. The senior serving organizations, the staff that are administering programs and marketing and bringing in older adults, the librarians, and the state arts agencies who are here, arts organizations, folks administering. This is a chance to be creative, to think outside the box, to be in communication with our communities and figure out what they need, and to dream bigger. So I was just thinking about that frozen day, but how it really exemplifies what we try to do with training when it's good.
Yeah, and I think that I totally agree. And I think what we learn is that we're learning. I think that something that we've learned from our state arts agencies, from this state particularly, was the goals of creative aging alone, of wanting to offer programming, or maybe even, striving to hit the creative aging arts education model, may not be the first place to start, right? Yep. That's absolutely a place, that we might be going for, but that's not where we begin. We begin in conversation with a partner. Who is it that you're trying to serve? Maybe who else, what other state agency do you need to support this effort to also serve their efforts to serve older adults? And what I keep learning, and I think Utah and Ohio are just such great examples of this, is that when we begin a partnership and a conversation with these states, they teach us.
Yeah.
and we disseminate what they
Yeah.
are learning. And I think that what I'm so grateful for from all of our partners across all of our time, though, is really, we learn from you and we then share what you're learning. And I find that, some of the biggest things that we have learned over the years, and I think the pandemic really illuminated this, to get older adults online, for example, and which so many organizations did, we saw them utilizing people outside of their own sort of networks. Oh my goodness, okay, we want to get our folks online. Who is doing, older adult programming online already? Oh, Senior Planet is. Let's share Senior Planet information with everybody else. Oh my goodness, NASAA is doing some great coming together convenings around what it means to teach online. The Teaching Artists Association, all of these people were coming together and working together to listen and learn. And I find that that has become the greatest sort of cross-sector sort of need that we've identified over the several years that we've been doing this work. And I'm so excited to hear from Ohio and Utah about the specifics of what that looks like in their states, because it does look so differently for every state, every organization, about where you're starting and where you want to go with creative aging.
Thank you both. Every time I hear that story, Julie, I'm like, I'm there with you. I have such a bold image of the snow and the taxidermy. Yeah, so I think a couple of things I just want to pull out from what I heard is just, it starts with knowing your community and really taking stock of what strengths and assets and unique things about your own state art agency, your own organization, your own artistry and creativity you can build on, really listening. And I think what's at the heart of this session today and conversation is that we're always learning. We're always listening, and it's a practice. And so I want to turn things over to Jason and Tracy from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your journey in this work and what you're learning and practicing. So over to you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. And thank you, NASAA, for having this and for all the support you've done for creative aging. So Tracy and I are going to share a story that we call Utah, Jason and Tracy's reluctant creative aging journey. So Utah has been doing creative aging for a while. Our arts education director, Jean Takuda Irwin, has been a longtime supporter of lifelong learning, that it is not just arts education for children, but it is lifelong learning. And we were one of the 13 pilot states that participated in the National Center for Creative Aging's community of practice. And there was an incredible leader here in my state named Ken Crosley, who ran an organization called Engage Utah, who really brought creative aging to me as a concept. And I fell in love with the concept, really supported him in doing some work. And we did some incredible things, like we brought out Susan Pearlstein and Stuart, I think I've got his name.
Kendall.
Kendall, yeah, but it wrote here as Kendall Small. But yeah, Stuart Kendall. And did some great trainings, and we were doing some grants, but honestly, nothing seemed to stick. Like, we would do this, and then the next year, it didn't feel like creative aging was really sticking in our state. So when the NASAA Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging grant came around, there was interest from our agency to do it. Tracy and I had interest, but we were also like, let's go for the lower grant. Let's not try and get the $60,000 grant. But then everyone in our agency was like, go big, go big, go big. So we applied for and came up with an excellent plan and received the $60,000 grant. Let me tell you why that Tracy and I were reluctant. Capacity. It's all about capacity. We have full plates already, and we were like, if we get this is going to be a ton of work. But you know, we pulled up our pants and said, let's do this, and went for it. And in the end, we were incredibly happy that we did. So we got the grant. Let me tell you about the work we did. We immediately contracted Lifetime Arts, and we did 4 trainings, 2 for cultural organizations, 1 for teaching artists, 1 for older adult service organizations. And as we suspected, this was indeed a ton of work. We reached out to people by email, phone calls, meetings, any means of convincing. And it was funny to us what was easy and what was not easy. We thought service organizations would kind of be excited about this, but that one really felt like we were pulling teeth to get them to do this training. So in the end, we do these 4 trainings, and then we launched this grant, and we were like, is anyone going to apply? And this is when things started to get really exciting for us. When we started to see applications coming in from multiple arts organizations, from museums, from individual artists, because we created a capacity in which that could take place, from senior living centers, from libraries, and from community centers. And we realized this had really touched a nerve. So I'm going to pass it to Tracy.
So we ran a grant, and the grant allowed for people to try hosting a project in the Lifetime model. So like a 6 to 10 week sequential learning opportunity. And we funded 26 projects, and they were wildly successful. And Jason and I had the pleasure / burden of entering a lot of surveys from participants by hand, because we created an online one and a paper one, and told teaching artists they could just mail them to us, and they did, which was great. But it took a lot of work to enter in. But we got to read these amazing things saying, I made friends, I met new people in my community, I learned a new skill. I'm now considering myself to be an artist. I didn't think I was an artist before. And our hearts were warmed. It totally. Jason and I, again, we were reluctant because of the amount of work, but we knew it was good work, but we didn't quite understand how great this really was. So what we decided to do moving forward is, since we got a great response from libraries in our first round, which we didn't expect, we ran another training with Lifetime Arts for libraries, and then an additional training to train more teaching artists. And so we're running a second round of grants. Basically right now they're open, and we'll fund, we hope, more projects this year. We've committed to 3 years of a pilot project, so we'll do this once more next year. And the excitement is growing. Yeah. And we actually had not planned to do additional trainings. We thought, like, we're done. This is the most we can do right now. And we are now keeping a list of everyone that's reaching out and saying, please, can I take the Lifetime training? I'm so interested. When are you doing it again? I will just add to Jason's story that we created a great partnership with the Utah Commission on Aging, and they've been an excellent partner through the journey, trying to get their constituents, which are mostly like senior centers or AAAs, if you're familiar with that term, to participate in our project. And as for capacity, I just wanted to add that I was on the phone with the Utah Commission on Aging before our grant initially opened. I was pregnant, and I was saying, I'll be here through the grant. It'll be fine. Don't worry. I've got this under control. And one of our colleagues ended up rushing me to the hospital that day. And so there was we were juggling a lot during this time period, but we've made it work, and it's been really fabulous. Jason,
I've just put into the chat, we actually created a creative aging impact report I just put a link in the chat. You can read that. And I want to share with you the favorite survey response that we received. So one of our questions was, did you attend all of the classes? And this was for every older adult who attended classes. And one of the answers was no. And then when asked why, he wrote, my wife left me at home, which just makes us laugh. So thank you.
Thank you both. So a couple things I really hear in your story is this is hard work, but it's also hard work. And Tracy, I remember when we were rehearsing and talking through this story initially, like, that was a point you really emphasized, right? Like, this is high touch work. This isn't, we talk about a model, but it's not a checklist by any means. I'm seeing in the chat a lot of response of, oh my gosh, I love all these different forms of creativity that we can embrace, and how to be really responsive, not only to the older adults that we're serving, but also, you know, as state arts agencies, to all of the different constituents, partners, the individual artists, you know, for that buy-in to work, it takes deep listening. It takes a lot of high touch outreach and relationship building, which is time. So we'll circle back to that in the end, but I want to underscore that because I think it's a big part of your story. I think it's a big part of why you've been so successful in building such beautiful partnerships across sectors and at multiple levels, and sort of increasing that buy-in. But I do hear that it's both hard work and hard work. So thank you for that story. Now I'd love to turn things over to Chiquita and Jared from the Ohio Arts Council to share a little bit about your journey and your story. So over to you both.
Thank you so much, Heather. Great story, Utah. Love to hear it. My name is Jared Small. I'm one of two arts learning coordinators at the Ohio Arts Council.
And I'm Chiquita Mullins-Lee here in Columbus, Ohio, the second part of the equation at the Ohio Arts Council, doing this wonderful work with creative aging. And thank you all for inviting us to be a part of this discussion.
Yes, thanks. So we are going to just begin our story with some quick background. We're also going to share just a few photos too. So you'll probably see those pop up on the screen any minute now. But what we want to sort of start with is just a very brief overview of what our creative aging work has looked like at the Ohio Arts Council for the past 2 years. And I'd encourage all of you to envision sort of a three-legged stool. And so when we applied for funding from NASAA, courtesy of EA Michelson Philanthropy, the first leg of that stool was training. Training specifically intended for Ohio teaching artists and Ohio organizations that serve the needs of older adults, like senior citizen centers, certainly arts organizations, residences where older adults live. You sort of get the idea. Staff from those sorts of organizations. So training both artists and staff. The second leg of the stool, if you will, are artist residencies. So taking that training and putting it into practice. That was the second leg. And finally, the third leg of the stool would be what amounted to become an in-person Ohio Creative Aging Summit, which was an in-person convening held in Columbus back in the spring, where we got to bring everyone that was part of this initiative, the training, the residencies together in person to celebrate successes and plan for the future. So those are the three legs of our stool. And of course, you can probably surmise that we did utilize the services of Lifetime Arts to help us achieve that first leg, the training component. And so why Lifetime Arts, you might ask? It's not as if we don't have folks here in Ohio that have helped us before in creative aging, that have delivered great PD for folks, that have attended conferences we put on to deliver stuff on aging and creative aging. But we knew after doing a little bit of digging and meeting with Lifetime Arts off the get-go that our missions were aligned and it was the right sort of fit at the right time, specifically with respect to training teaching artists. So off we went with Lifetime Arts to to work with them on the training component. I'm going to pause here and just show you a little bit about what's on the screen. So you should be seeing a picture. This is a photograph from our Ohio Creative Aging Summit. Of course, it was a drama theater-based residency. This was a performance that showcased one of our drama residencies under the Creative Aging Initiative. The teaching artist, Candace Mazer-Darman, is second from your left there, sitting down. And of course, one of the participants is giving a fabulous monologue that they wrote themselves. So this was a really wonderful, I think, an encapsulation of what that event was like. But it took a lot of effort to get to this event. And so what we'd like to sort of pause for now, I'd love to hear from Chiquita a little bit about what consisted of leading up to that creative aging event, what happened once we received the grant. So toss it back to you, Chiquita.
Thank you, Jared. Well, we can go back in the Wayback Machine, going back to around 2013, and we were a part of that original cohort of state arts agencies who were part of the National Center for Creative Aging and that whole initiative there, and that helped us to kind of build on some groundwork that had already been kind of set before then. But what we did was we focused on residencies. We realized that we could take some opportunity to use some OAC funding and to focus on residencies. So we had about 10 or 11 residencies around the state of Ohio. We sent teaching artists into residencies that served older adults, senior centers, those kind of things. And it was eye-opening because we realized that there was a need for this kind of programming. And so we worked with seniors in all the disciplines and for 2-week residencies. And then we stopped for a minute because there's been a lot of stopping and starting. We stopped for a minute. Then after about a year or so, we came back and realized, all right, let's get back into this. Let's offer the opportunity for people to apply to receive funding from the Ohio Arts Council. And so that is the part that happened next, that we offered these applications. People applied, people got grants. There was no need for matching funds. People got grants. And then again, we were doing these creative aging programs around the state and all the various disciplines. So then fast forward to 2020, 2021, we get this wonderful grant. We think, all right, how do we approach this? Because we knew how big it was going to be to do this. It was not going to be easy. But we thought, okay, we've got some contacts, we've got some host sites, let's start reaching out. So we called people and we called people back because they didn't always call us back. And we cold called and we sent emails, and sometimes people would respond and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes folks who had been part of the original initiative that did not come back to us, but we still pushed forward. We got people involved. We were able to set up over 20 residencies working with teaching artists, training teaching artists. Our original initiatives did not involve training as much. We just basically selected people who had the heart for it, who had already shown some interest in doing creative aging work. But this time we want to offer them actual training so they would know what they were doing when they went in to talk and teach and take care of older adults. And so it was a really exciting opportunity for us to have the training for ourselves, for our host sites, for our teaching artists, and then to grow from there. And then that took us up to the current, this photograph that you're seeing now, this current initiative with our host. These were 2 of our teaching artists actually at our Creative Aging Summit. And just, I think what was touching about that was just the camaraderie that we were able to see, that people came together who hadn't seen each other for a long time because it was after COVID, but they came together, they were able to share their experiences, and we realized just how important this initiative was and that people were able to connect on a really meaningful level.
I'll second that the energy in the room was palpable at our Creative Aging Summit. And there's the 3rd photograph. We should actually give a lot of credit to Galia and Annie Montgomery, who actually came to Ohio, to Columbus, to partner with us to offer and provide content for this summit. So the photograph here is one of the more closer to the end closing exercises where we ask folks to partner up. So we partner host sites with teaching artists and other folks, and they got to do some really wonderful sort of hands-on activities to kind of end the day. So that's the photograph there. But I also wanted to sort of amen Chiquita's point that this certainly did take a lot of legwork, a lot of cold calling. What you're seeing here is sort of the end result or the outcome. But we're really excited for what's next because the Ohio Arts Council has chosen to continue advancing this work by continuing to extend and support those artist residencies that have been happening as part of this initiative into the coming year. So the work is continuing at host sites that did participate, and the few that did not. These folks are going to continue the really good work and continue to build that solid foundation that we've been investing in now for quite some time. So lots of great takeaways, some exciting next steps. What we've definitely learned is about the enthusiasm here in Ohio for this work to continue, and we can't wait to see what happens next.
Thank you both so much. And this work is joyful. So, I mean, I just want to underscore that, right? It is joyful. Those photos are inspiring, and it is about connection. It's about really tapping in to what it is to be human, right? And to feel human, and to feel like we have something to offer and to create and to give back to our communities and our cultures throughout our lifetimes. I want to underscore the incredible dedication to investing in teaching artists that you all have given, and to forming this community of practice. And Chiquita, you mentioned something that you started and you paused and you started again. And I think both of these stories illustrate something that is really important, is like both agencies made a commitment, and sometimes it went forward and then sometimes it had to pause, you know, and that's growth, right? That's part of what learning is. But I think you all have found a community of practice to keep you going through the pauses. This opportunity, this institute that we're all part of, is a community of practice. And something else I'm hearing is that you're recognizing that teaching artists need a community of practice, right? Like how do we prioritize those in the front lines of this work and support them so that they can continue in the work? As well as continue to listen to older adults to be responsive. So thank you. And we'll circle back to some of those themes. So I want to start a little bit of a dialogue here amongst all of us, but I want to start with Annie and Julie. So these are two of the many state arts agencies that we've had the privilege to work with over the 2 years, and some even before. And I'm curious, as you're listening to these stories, what are some of the through lines that you're hearing, not only between these two states, but you know, amongst the other states that you've worked with so deeply over the past 2 years?
I mean, baseline, I would say the hard work, right? This is, we said it, you said it before beautifully, Heather, this is heart, but it's hard work. And I think that sometimes we might underestimate when we come into this work, how much high touch work it's going to take, how much partnerships are going to be important, and forming maybe new partnerships. I think these programs are an opportunity for especially state arts agencies to work maybe with communities they've wanted to but never have, to partner with that library, to partner with senior serving organizations. And I think across the board, what both of these states really exemplified was that high touch, was that reach out, and was in depth, in basis, asking for help, like being honest that we can't hold this, you know, the capacity that's required to really make good programs. We need help. We need to bring together, as you're saying, a community practice of teaching artists that are going to keep doing this work and are going to push it along. We need to make sure that we have our other state agencies involved. So I think that to me feels like a real through line.
Yeah, I would say, piggybacking on that a bit, is that it's also, you know, the way of the world and the way of change in this world, often the foundation of that is in our artists and what they bring to the table and how they work and connect to the community. And the investment in artists, the listening of artists who are on the ground doing the work we learn from every single day. They develop the best practices in the field of creative aging. They develop the sort of blend between the different areas of practice and creative aging. And so, you know, I especially, you know, appreciate Utah and Ohio's investment in their artists and in their creation of these community of practice, so their artists can come together to share their best practices, share their connections to community. And it's the agencies who are then able to step back and look at what are the needs then. If the artists are the ones doing the work, where are the missing pieces to gather the funding? What other agencies need to come on board? But I think what I keep learning from, and what I see the partnerships in the states that we keep learning from most are those artists who are on the ground doing the work. They are the ones who are telling us, the missing pieces and where, the funding, is lacking maybe, or where maybe there's a potential partnership, or I know that this community wants to do taxidermy. We just need to find the artist, you know what I mean? Like, and that real intricate, involving the artist in the real sort of planning and the steps forward of this, I keep, for me, every time I step deeper into creative aging, it's like, okay, artists, tell me what's happening on the ground. And then we'll figure out how to help you make this more accessible for all of our constituents of older adults we want to serve.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I just wanted to add that from the, again, in terms of this artist led, we had this opportunity to train all folks, artists from across the state, this country. And it was so incredible to work with, folks that were doing Mardi Gras beading in Louisiana, and then folks that were doing duck decoy carving in Idaho, and everybody, again, is responsive to their communities. They understand what's going to, attract their communities. And what we get to do in training is just bring everybody together. These are like artists from wildly different backgrounds and different forms, but then when they come together in the world of creative aging and in their shared commitment to, advancing the artistry of older adults, what we always find is at the end of every training, whether it's teaching artists, librarians, arts orgs, is everybody wants to stay connected. It's the first question of the Q&A on the third day is how can we stay connected? And I feel like what these agencies really did is that was expressed, and then these agencies supported that connection. Because sometimes that last day, everyone wants to stay connected, and then it kind of goes away because there weren't resources to support that. But these folks really saw that interest, built that community of practice, and then kept supporting it over time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think something that you mentioned earlier, Annie, was in the other example of training the librarians. In that first story, right, that that the librarians, part of the reason they found it overwhelming, right, is that they weren't in the same room with some of the creatives, the artists, the organizations that knew that piece. But the librarians are like the community connector, right? And so sometimes we build a community of practice just of the teaching artists, but I think also what that story so well illustrates is that when you broaden the community of practice, the work gets lighter in many ways because we're all bringing our strengths, we're all bringing our unique relationships with community and with older adults and our assets. The other thing I want to lift up from the chat real quick is this notion of pause, because it's, I think, so important. Sometimes we think like we paused and that was a failure. Pause is not a failure. And I appreciate the chat because there's a phenomenal artist, Carlton Turner, many of you know, who I've heard, I'm probably going to botch the quote, but mentioned one time to me that we have to slow down. We have so much work to do. And I think it's in the slowing down, right, that the deep listening happens, the recalibrating, the course correction, the who else do we need to talk to? Who else needs to come around the table so that we can do this work more deeply? We can do this more expansively. So I just want to lift that up. I also want to underscore in the stories that we heard, I'm going to say it again, the heart work, the hard work. For many of you, capacity is stretched thin, right? We're still in a pandemic. We're coming out of a pandemic. These are long-term commitments. These stories, I think 2013, right? Chiquita mentioned that this work began. So I'd love to, turn it to Utah and Ohio and just what is, as you sort of look to the future, right, in your states, what are you holding in your hearts as the biggest challenge to continuing this work? And what kinds of supports, what does continued support look like to make this work possible? What does that continued journey look like?
Well, I'll just say briefly that more support from the AAAs, for example, really getting them to buy in. They've been just sort of peripherally involved with us at this point, but we want more support from them. And then just even going up higher than that, leadership, whether it's government, whether it's those owners of senior residence homes and facilities that serve older adults, even in the media, a greater sense of commitment from the media to not only support this work, but to change the way they portray older adults. Because if they would recognize how artistic and creative and wonderful these people are as they get involved with this project, they would, oh gosh, I'm having a power outage, but I'll keep talking. But they would understand that they need to, turn the lights on the older adults and on the work that we're doing, and really billboard it and recognize that people can be productive well into their 70s, 80s, and 90s.
I just want to sort of jump onto that. Yes, we're in a light centered time room. So if mine goes off, you'll know why. But I have to give so much due credit to Lifetime Arts and NASAA and EA Michelson Philanthropy for believing in the work of state arts agencies. We are day to day trying our very best to support as many folks as we can in and through the arts. And before this initiative, the notion and concept of creative aging was foreign to me entirely. And along with that, the frameworks, the terminology and definitions, AAAs didn't know what they were up until then. But getting exposed and talking to those people was excellent. I still feel like I have so much more to go to really understand that environment, that when we make those calls or send those emails, we're connecting to the right folks and saying the right things. And I know it takes time, and I love the beauty of the pause too. I think that's brilliant. So from a national standpoint or statewide or even local, more support, more professional development, so that we have the tools and resources that we need to continue building that bridge to the folks that we're trying to get involved.
I think that one thing that I like that we did in Utah is that we put this out as a 3-year committed plan. And we said for 3 years, we're going to be able to run this grant. We're going to be able to continue to train. And we're going to be able to really help this happen. And so I think people in our state are seeing that now we're deep into year 2. And we're saying, if you received it 2 years in a row, not next year, just so we can spread the wealth. And what that's doing is it's pushing agencies and people to start making plans that happen outside of us. And a couple of things we've seen that I really am happy about is applicants coming into our regular project grant category that are applying to do creative work, creative aging work that otherwise have never actually connected to our agency. And so that's actually pretty exciting to see. We continue, at the end of the 3-year, we'll figure out where we sit, but we continue to try and find the right partners that we can, because we don't want this to just end, of course, but we're trying to find the right partners to say, can you help make this sustainable longer term? And it's actually one of the reasons why we have this impact report, is that, if that's something that we can get people excited about here and decide to put some money towards, that's going to be really helpful for us. Anything to add, Tracy?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think one, I just want to lift up, Jason, you mentioned that through this work you've built new relationships, and that you're also looking for the right partnerships, which can mean something very different to, you know, where you are in your state. But sometimes it's okay to bless and release a partner, right? If it's causing more work, right? If it's just, I think that goes both for at the systems level, right? And it also goes for the practice on the ground. And that comes from just really being clear about what your goals are. And making sure those goals align and that the work is shared and the responsibility is shared. And sometimes that takes time, right? I also, Chiquita, really appreciated your mention of the media, and I put in the chat. You know, when we talk about training, I think it's easy to think like, oh, like training on how to design a program and how to deliver it. But when we talk about training, it's really much broader than that. What we're really aiming for is a culture shift, right? And so often this work starts, you know, on the programmatic end, but it's not successful long-term if we're not bringing in stakeholders from multiple levels within our organizations and multiple levels within our partner organizations, right? And that's both from a direct service point of view, but also this larger systems point of view. And I think it is really about feeling it in your heart, right? Like it's not an intellectual exercise. When you go and you attend a creative aging program, you feel it and you feel that joy. It becomes heart work. And so it's both the reports, right? Demonstrating this is the need, this is what's happening, where can you play a role, but also demonstrating the work, right? And it's through that culture shift that we realize that this is just what it is to be human, is to be creative. It's a human right. That I think we start to see shifts in policy. And the media are great storytellers, but so are all of us. That's all of us are great storytellers. Our artists are storytellers. We are storytellers. Even when we started doing this session, you know, some of our panelists were like, I don't know what story to tell. I'm not on the ground doing the work. But listen to these stories. We are all storytellers, and those stories shift culture. So Annie, Julie, things that are coming up for you before we shift over to opening up to some questions from our attendees.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like I realized earlier, I was like, and you can partner with all these different groups, and I don't want to make it sound simple and easy. I think a privilege I get to have as Lifetime Arts is because we train all these different sectors. We intersect with senior serving orgs. We work with libraries. We work with veterans in divisions and associations. You start to realize that all of these sectors have different languages. They have different priorities. And our founder, Maura O'Malley, always likes to say, like, one library is the same as that one library. Like every library is different. Every senior center is different. So when I'm talking about partnership, that's why it's so high touch, because we have to kind of speak different languages and figure out what's the language for this senior center. And I think what you're talking about, Heather, that I hope trainings do is start to create a common language, right? And bring everybody together and have that kind of culture shift so that senior center can talk with that library and they understand each other and they connect as to why this work is important. Then a partnership can flourish. So I hope that's what part of what we're doing and training is that unified language.
Yeah, and I would just say the other people like that can tell the story are the participants. You know, how can we get their voices? I saw in the chat earlier, someone asked about, are you doing any sort of exhibitions or galleries of your 55 plus participants? It's like, where can we, as arts agencies, as arts and culturals, as arts and education organizations, you know, there's all sorts of folks here in the room, but how can we lift up the artwork of our older adult artists? Because what we say about the students that come to our classes is, yes, they're students, but we're not teaching them a skill just to teach them the skill. We're helping them learn to be artists, true artists. And I don't mean they have to be rich artists, but, you know, I'm an artist and I'm not rich. You know, like, what does it mean to identify as an artist? It means you're putting your vulnerability, you're putting your truth, you're expressing yourself artistically in the hopes that it touches somebody else. And that's what our older adults do. And how can we lift that up even more and more?
Yeah. And I lift up something in the chat, which is partnership is about relationship building, and it can take counseling, it can take support, right? And I also want to stress that point, Annie. I mean, some of the most incredible efforts around advocacy that I've seen nationwide are when older adults are the ones showing up at, city council meetings talking about the need for these programs, right? When they're in around the table with us, when we're developing these partnerships, and they're speaking from their own experience and from their own point of view. So we're going to pause on this conversation and open the table a little wider. The chat is on fire. And so, Galia, I'd love to sort of open things up to see what kinds of questions we have from folks in the chat.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. Hello, everyone. So I see Alan, I see your hand, and I see your question in the chat. I'm going to start with Sue's question that came in earlier. Sue asks, how do you help organizations like libraries overcome institutional bureaucracy to keep creative aging programs going after the grant project?
This is a big question. I have one idea, but I'd love to, if anybody, and Ohio, Utah folks, if you guys have your own direct experience. Something we talk about a lot at Lifetime Arts is that our service work, right? We are a service organization. Our advocacy work needs to be from bottom up and top down. It can't just be one or the other. In a library that might be a small distance between, the bottom and top of like the power hierarchical structure. But I think it still applies, meaning we want to work with the programmers, who are going to be actually administering those programs. We want to help them understand the importance of it. We want to help them understand how they can advocate up to get more support and get more funding, how they can make sure that they have enough staff to support them. So it's not just one person running a creative aging program, but there is some legacy sustainability built in. And we also want to, if we can, talk to the top level, right? Who's the state library? Who's that regional librarian? How can they also make sure that they're buying in? How can we help them understand the importance so that they are there to support the needs of the actual programmers? So that's the best I can kind of, that's a large question, but I think whenever we get caught feeling like there's not movement, it's because we're not approaching these organizations that might be a little more bureaucratic from kind of both sides.
I guess I can add one thing, which is think creatively. One of our libraries has approached us and said, we're just not allowed to add to our budget. Even if this, fully funds a project, we can't do that. And I actually haven't circled back to this library. They were working on something else, but I'm curious if we can fund a partner instead. They're open to hosting the project. That's not the problem. The problem is, accepting the money. Well, let's put the money somewhere else. And to a partner that can pay the artist, can buy the supplies, something. But it's just identifying what the true issue is and figuring out a way around it.
Thank you.
I
Tracy,
think I'd also add
Tracy.
that one of the best tools that you can have is to actually run the program. Because I think after you actually have done it, and you have the people that have been impacted from it, and once they start sharing their stories, and once you gather that data, it becomes really clear. And that's what Tracy and I were saying when we were reading the surveys. It was really eye-opening to us just how deep this impact is. And I think if you have the opportunity to run it once, Sue, then those people become huge advocates for pushing them to get over their bureaucracy hesitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason and Tracy. Alan, I'm not gonna forget about your question, but this next one is related to partnerships, and it's for Jason and Tracy. So I'm gonna bring that one up now, which is, speaking of the work of finding and building up partnerships in this work, is Utah Arts and Museums looking to maintain the same partner orgs in future funding cycles, or are you open to working with new organizations? Which you sort of answered, Tracy, but I wanted to give you a chance to.
Of who gets funded with the grant? I'm assuming that's what the question is.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, the way we have it defined is it's for people who have gone through the lifetime arts training that are the ones that can access this. We are, yes, looking to figure out how we can expand that and other, trying to figure out training models that people can go to get up to speed in order to apply for the grant. For the process of our current grant, though, this 3-year cycle, we are kind of following this model. But like I said, after that, that's when we want to open it up and start see how it can expand this impact and who we can partner with. I hope I'm answering that question correctly.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. We have a thank you so much for clarifying. So I think you nailed it. And Alan, back over to your question on marketing and promotion to encourage older adults' involvement with arts activities. Do you want to, I see your hand raised, Alan. Do you want to further clarify what your question is?
Thank you. Great program.
Thank you.
I love all the presenters. First, I have to give a plug to the Maryland State Arts Council because they have encouraged teaching artists like myself and arts and education program people to get involved in different groups and different opportunities to reach the citizens of Maryland in special groups, in particular, the older aging community. My challenge is that trying to get people to come out and take part in the programs after COVID and all the acts is very difficult and it's very challenging. I'm coming out of being a arts and education with the schools. You already have audiences. They're there. They can't go anywhere. But to bring the older aging community to senior centers, libraries, that is very, very difficult. And since it's all starting and there's money available to find these programming, what suggestions do you have that might be able to overcome some of those obstacles to bring people out of their homes, bring them out of the virtual environments and bring them back so that they can interact with each other and the teaching artists and the communities to which is supporting their overall health?
Such an important question and such a big question. I'm just hopping in. I mean, it's really real, Alan. I don't think there's like something that solves this completely. I think what we talk about a lot at Lifetime is, what we always want to be putting forth is what are the benefits to folks to participate in these programs. As we've been talking about, developing yourself as an artist, learning artistic skills in an art form that you are interested in and you as the older adult want to develop yourself in is super important. Just as, and I think even more now in a sort of post or during or whatever COVID state we're in, is that social connection. I get that in COVID, that's also complex, right? Are we socially connecting still with masks? Are we socially connecting at a distance? I don't know, but that depends on everybody's particular sites. But I still think that, and even more so, is a huge draw. I almost always, when I'm advertising my theater programs with older adults, my marketing happens to be questions. Do you have a story to tell? Do you want to make new friends? Do you want to try something new? Those sort of typical things. But I think that that desire to connect and connect through really developing oneself. We're not just getting together and having coffee, though that's great. We're actually going to develop deeper connections with each other through artistic work. To me, feels like one of the deepest pull here. In addition to your baseline, what's coming up for folks accessibility wise? There needs to be transport, there needs to be more transportation provided. Do we need, a huge thing we talk about a lot with older adults is we need to first ask them what's getting in the way. You express some interest. Why aren't you coming? We might be able to address those things. We might not. But I think a huge thing too is when folks feel invited. Something I do too. If somebody doesn't show up to a class, right? I call the next week, I think folks want to feel they are invited and they're missed. when they don't attend. Bunch of things I'm just throwing at you, but I feel you, and I think it's a real concern right now.
Thank you so much. I just want to underscore that this is really, again, about learning. It's about adapting, right? I mean, Lifetime Arts, there's a model that we train in, and then there's so many adaptations of that because people are starting in different places in this journey. They're living in different communities. There's different challenges, barriers, opportunities, right? And then the pandemic came and we pivoted everything online, and that was an adaptation, right? And so I think creative aging is a creative practice, as Annie mentioned, and we should listen, infuse creativity throughout the work, both in our partnership development. Tracy, you underscored that. You got to be creative. Sometimes it's just getting in the room and thinking about what can we do here? Where can we start? Who else can we bring to the table that might be able to share some of the responsibility so that we're not holding all of it, right? And so I want to thank our panelists for sharing your stories, for your journeys, and for everyone who joined us today, because I know there's a lot of stories out there, and I'm really excited for the next couple of weeks so that we can surface more of these, because we are a community of practice. So let's continue to be creative, to take pause when we need to, and to treat it like a practice. Because as a field, it should be flexible, it should be responsive, and we should be listening to those most affected, who are our older adults first and foremost, and definitely our teaching artists who are on the ground, and building around that. So thank you, Tracy, Chiquita, Annie, Julie, Galia, Jason, for your time. Again, to NASAA for hosting this space for us. And as we transition out, I know Susan has a couple of quick housekeeping notes for us. We just want to put one question in the chat for you. In one word, what is still resonating in you from this conversation that you will take into your own work, embedding creative aging in your state? And with that, over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Heather, and all. Thank you so much for a really fruitful and rich start to the Creative Aging Institute. It is such a pleasure to hear just good collaboration, stories about how this work really gets done. One takeaway that's with me from your conversation is about how creative aging is really a movement that we're building, and that requires collaboration from stakeholders from all different parts of the arts sector and the aging services sector. And so everyone who's gathered here today truly plays a role in that. Sometimes I think that as individual artists, we might not know how to connect, for example, with our state arts agency in our state, or we might not know that Lifetime Arts and other artist service organizations are out there for our benefit. And it really is my hope that the Creative Aging Institute and this conversation and the conversations to come will just invite everyone to meet and connect and be curious about who's in the room together and how we each are weaving together a network that ultimately does build this movement. It will take all of us. With that, I really truly can't imagine a better way to start the Creative Aging Institute 2022. Thank you all very much. See you soon.